Hey guys! Today we will take a closer look at Scalar, a very interesting 4-channel quantizer with the ability to add some human feel to the sound. Let's start! Okay, so the idea for this video came from my Patreons. Thank you guys so much for your support, and let's have a quick overview of Scalar and what we are dealing with, and then build a patch together from scratch. So like I said, Scalar is a 4-channel quantizer, and by 4 channels I mean that it can quantize up to 4 different CV sources, but they will all be quantized to the same programmed scale. We have 4 inputs, and each one of them is normalized to the previous one. So if we have 2 different sources, one at input 1 and another one at input 3, then what's coming in at input 1 will flow also to input 2, and what's coming in input 3 will flow also to input 4. Let's jump to the top section of Scalar. The 8 slots represent 8 octaves. We can select them by left-clicking them, and we can turn them on and off by holding Ctrl and clicking them. So we can choose exactly to which octaves we want a signal to be quantized to. The row below it represents the musical intervals. Again, we can choose an interval by left clicking it. And then we can see and change also the sense amount by clicking and dragging the number. And something to keep in mind, when changing the sense amount, the tuning will no longer be equal. And this we can see here, and we can at any stage go back to equal tuning or equal temperament by clicking the tuning function. By holding Ctrl and clicking the different intervals, we can turn them on and off, and this will affect to which intervals the signal will be quantized to. And we have 2 options. We can select different intervals for each octave, or we can change the octave settings to shared, and then the selected notes will be shared across the octaves. Another thing we can do is audition the different notes by right-clicking them, and this will override everything else going on. So we have here the FM operator. Let's send Scalar to its Volt per octave input and audition some notes. So I will go back to variable octaves, go to the first octave, turn the level on, and now by right-clicking I can audition the notes. Let's have a look now at the 4 controls we have, and for this we will start the clock, which will run the sample and hold section of kinks or utilities from Audible instruments. Let's initialize Scalar, set the octaves to shared, and select a few notes. So we will select 1, 3, 4, 6, 8, 9, and 11. Let's send the sample and hold to input 1 and have a listen. Okay, now the first control is depth, which will change the strength of quantization, and by reducing the strength, the signal will be less and less quantized. So now we have 100% quantization. We can take this down. And at 0 it will not be quantized at all. Another control we have is the track control, which will create the effect of changing the tracking of the oscillator across the different octaves. If 1 volt equals 1 octave, by changing the track function we can affect this relationship between the notes in the different octaves, so 1 octave will no longer equal 1 volt. Then we have the warp control, which will introduce a random error to the quantized signal. And we have the offset control, so we can offset the signals up or down and transpose the sequence, for example. And here there's another thing to keep in mind is that the quantizer will always add voltage to the oscillator's tuning. So if you want a D minor scale, for example, you have to make sure that your oscillator is tuned to the note D. Or if you want an E major scale, you'll have to tune your oscillator to the note E. Or you can use, of course, the offset knob to offset the whole scale up or down. The other option will be, of course, to count the intervals of scalar, but that is a bit tedious, so the best option will be tuning your oscillator. So let's start building a patch and see this module in action. Okay, so first of all, let's add some voices. We will use the FAM oscillator from Animated Circuits. This is the one here. And also the sequencer, the ADDR sequencer from BogAudio. Let's set a 7-step sequence. We will run this sequencer with a multiplied clock, every clock multiplied by 2. Let's send the output already to the first input of scalar. We can right click scalar. Let me just enable the opacity of the cables. We can right click scalar and disable all notes, so we can start from a fresh scale. We can of course also enable all notes, but for now let's disable them. Let's change also the octaves to shared and enter some notes. So let's enter 1, 4, let's say also 5, 6, 7, 8, and 11. Let's send this to the oscillator, to the volt per octave input of the oscillator, activate the volt per octave function, and let's send this to the mixer through the FM output. Very cool, and change the step values. Yeah. Very cool. Now let's use stages or the segment generator from Audible instruments to modulate the FM depth. So if I click this button here, click and hold it until it's blinking, we have here cycling function which we can use as an LFO, and this will modulate the FM amount of the oscillator. So let's take this all the way down and let's open the attenuator and lower the frequency of the LFO somewhere here. Very nice. And now we can introduce some feel to the sound by increasing the warp amount. Again, this will introduce error or randomized error to the tuning. So let's say 0.3%. We can also lower the depth, the quantization depth, let's say to 98. Very nice. And now we can add another voice. Let's use the folding oscillator, again animated circuits, this is this one here. We will use another sequencer, so let's duplicate this ADDR sequencer. This time we will use 5 steps. We will run it with the same clock, here, and also reset them with our clock, so they will be nice and synced. Now let's send this sequencer to the second input of scalar, and from there to our oscillator. Again, let's activate the volt per octave function of the oscillator, and also activate the second oscillator. So we have 2 different oscillators here. So now both sequences will be quantized to the same scale. Let's send the individual oscillators outputs to the mixer. Let's take the folding amount all the way down, and now we can change the step values for this sequencer. Very nice. And again, let's use stages to modulate the folding amount. So again, click and hold this button until the green light is blinking. Now we have an LFO. This will go to the depth of the folding oscillator. Let's already open the attenuator. somewhere here, lower the frequency. Very nice. And let's add 2 FM operators from BogAudio, and also 2 pitch tools modules from 21 kilohertz. This will be for this oscillator, and another one for the second one. Let's activate the level envelope of the oscillators. Take the sustain all the way down, attack almost all the way down so we don't get those clicks. Very nice. Now the first channel of Scalar will go to the first pitch tools module. The second channel will go to the second pitch tools module. Let's raise the pitch by 7 semitones, so a perfect fifth, and send this the signals to the volt per octave input of the oscillators, of the FM operators. Then they will go already to the mixer. Now we need something to trigger them, so we will use the clock, the same multiplied by 2 clock, to trigger the oscillators. Let's take this 1 octave down and listen just to this for a second. So we have again the same quantization, but they are 7 semitones higher in pitch, and they are also more percussive because of the envelope that we are using. And now let's use 2 more segments of the segment generator of stages to modulate the feedback amount. So first of all, let's listen to the amount we want to reach, somewhere here and somewhere here. Again, click and hold, so we get 2 more LFOs. One will go to the first FM operator, the second one will go to the second FM operator. Let's lower the frequency a bit. So we have lots of movement. Very nice. Now we can also transpose the sequence. So we will use constants from ML, which will output constant voltage in steps of semitones in this case. We will also use the fundamental sequential switch, the second one. So we have 4 inputs and 1 output. Let's send the negative 5 semitones to step number 4 and the negative 7 to step number 3. Let's clock the sequential switch with a divided clock, however a clock divided by 16, and also reset everything again with our clock. Now let's send this to the offset input or the offset CV input of Scalar and open the attenuator all the way. Step 2. Step 3, transposed by negative 5 semitones. Step 4, transposed by negative 7 semitones. Let's listen to this one more time. Very nice. Okay, let's add another sequencer. We will use ions from the Geodesics collection. Let's change the skin to the dark matter edition. Let's add 2 more voices. We will use Basal from Vult. We will use 2 oscillators. Let's add also a VCA, the one from AS, and also an ADSR. Also the one from AS. Very nice. Let's set the values of both sequences. Something like this, let's say. And you can see already that I go only up in pitch. And this is another thing to keep in mind. Scalar will not quantize negative voltage. So everything below 0 volts will be quantized to the lowest interval set on Scalar. Now let's clock ions with another multiplied clock, however a clock multiplied by 4. Very nice, and also reset it of course to our clock. Okay, from ions it will go to the scalar, to the two more inputs of scalar, from there to the oscillators. Okay, now the oscillators will go to the VCA, and the ADSR, or the envelope generator, will modulate the VCA. The ADSR will receive a gate from our clock, so the same multiplied by 4. And let's send this to the mixer and see how it sounds like. Let's just lower the attack and the sustain. And now this can go to the mixer. Let's mute also everything else so we can listen just to this. Oh yeah. And of course, because everything is coming from scalar, it will be transposed together. Let's also modulate the oscillators with stages. So I have two more segments here that I can use as LFOs. Let's do something like this. And modulate, let's say, the modulation 1 of the first oscillator and the modulation 2 of the second oscillator. Oh yeah. And then listen to everything together. So again, this is the FEM oscillator. Then we have the folding oscillator. Then we have the FM operators, which are tuned 7 semitones higher in pitch. And then the Basal oscillators. And everything is being quantized by scalar. Very cool. Now interesting things start to happen when we modulate the tracking, for example, with an audio rate signal. So let's add kinks or utilities from Audible instruments, and also a VCA. I will use the one from the fundamental modules. Let's send the noise output from the sample and hold section of kinks through the VCA to the track CV input of scalar. And let's use the sample and hold section to modulate the VCA, but first we will rectify the signal, so we will get only positive voltage. Here we have the signal inverter rectifier section, so we will send the full rectified signal to modulate the VCA. And let's trigger the sample and hold again with the same multiplied by 4 clock, so you can see already we have the VCA modulated. And let's open the attenuator of the tracking just a bit. Oh yeah. So you can hear this effect again without. Nice and clean. And with, let's take it all the way. Now take it down a bit. So this is the effect it will get. Now we can add even more movement by modulating the quantization depth, for example. So let's add another ADSR module. Let's use the one from BogAudio now. And let's trigger it with a divided clock. So again, each time that the sequential switch is receiving a trigger, also the envelope will be triggered. Let's lower the sustain and send the envelope to the depth CV input. And now we can invert the modulation by turning the attenuator to the left. And you can see here the depth amount. Let me just zoom in a bit. The depth amount changing or being modulated. adds this movement each time the scalar is receiving an offset. Oh yeah. Okay, now let me just mute this for a second. As I said in the beginning, we can also use Scala files. So let's add another scalar. Very nice. And reconnect all the signals through this scalar. So we'll take all of the sequencers to the inputs and from the outputs to the oscillators. Okay, and now we can load a Scala file. So by right-clicking, we can import a Scala file. So let's choose one and let's listen to this. Ooh, this is weird. Let's load a different one. Okay, so here we have just 7 notes. There will be a link in the description to a link to a website where you can download lots of Scala files. So you can experiment, maybe you can find something you would like. And of course, we can also export our scales as Scala files and share them with others, or just save it for later use. Let's mute this again for a second and bring back our original scalar. Okay, unmute. You can get rid of this here. Let's save the patch. Very nice. So you can hear there's lots of movement, lots of detuning going around that adds a lot of feel to the sound. Very cool, and that was it, guys. Like always, there will be a link in the description to this patch. Feel free to download it and take a closer look. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button. If you enjoy what I do, consider becoming a Patreon. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe and hit the bell. And have a good one.